Hello, I'm Dr. Lee Merritt. You can find me at themedicalrebel.com. I'm also on Rumble at the Medical Rebel channel. And this video is about parasite protocols, how to rid yourself of parasites. And I'm going to explain to you in this video why I think it's critical. We all do this now, why it helps people with or without having taken the vaccine. And I'm going to tell you the ins and outs and some of the subtleties of doing that. Okay, so I call it the parasite paradigm. A paradigm is really a way of looking at something. And the problem we have is we are living in a viral paradigm, and we need to get out of that. That's a false paradigm. It makes you look at things the wrong way. It's like the magician that waves his hand over to the right while he's picking your pocket over to the left. In this case, they're killing us. So let's change our worldview a little bit, and I'm going to explain here why I think that's necessary and what this means. So I want to thank my colleagues in the medical freedom movement, I guess I would call it, Celeste Solem and Karen Kingston for her. Celeste is a former FEMA, and she's been doing a lot of work looking at the DARPA literature and exposing a lot of technology things. Karen Kingston, Pfizer whistleblower, has been looking at old literature and patents and putting it all together. The 5 docs, I think you all knew who they are, and we all talk about this every month. Brian Artis, who's a chiropractor that's been instrumental in lots of good discussions about COVID, and specifically got me thinking a little differently about parasites. So I thank him a lot. So here we go. Now, from the beginning, I never believed this was an airborne virus. I thought this was a contact poison or toxin. Keep in mind, virus in Latin does not mean little animalcule that flies out of your mouth and makes other people sick. Virus means toxin. We need to start changing our language to changing our understanding that when we get sick and we sneezing and wheezing and coughing, something we say we got a cold. You didn't catch a cold. You're toxic, and you're getting rid of the toxins. Venom doesn't fit. I had this discussion with Brian Artis. I'm not saying there isn't some part of this whole venom thing that fits in here. Certainly the Nicorette gum is a good idea, but it's not the major causing disease. It doesn't fit what we saw clinically. If venom were the problem, then children would have died and adults would have lived. That isn't right. Now, the other thing I realized that there was a problem about was this mRNA technology. Besides all the literature that showed how dangerous it was, how bad it was on all the animal studies, and was still bad, by the way. They're still doing animal studies for cancer therapies using mRNA, and the animals are still dying. Don't think that's past tense. It's just too expensive. I mean, they claim that the one mRNA technology they've actually gotten to market was a technology that was for some ophthalmologic issue. I can't remember what it was, but it was for some ophthalmologic issue. And the cost was in 2018, the cost was almost $1 million for a treatment. How did they suddenly, within 2 years, supply billions of doses at less than $30 a dose? You tell me. That doesn't make sense. So there are things that don't make sense with what's happening here. Then we started seeing this, and I'm going to play a little bit of this video. This is a video that dropped from a compilation of different things, but it's primarily German researchers showing you that cancer is a parasitical infection. And these are not the only people that say this, by the way.
And in this video, we're going to show you the video microscopy of those microparasites, how they behave, and why there is indisputable proof that cancer indeed is a microparasitical infection, and that mainstream cancer research has not recognized it yet as such. And this theory was put forward by Dr. Weber and some other scientists from the Max von Pettenkofer Institute, a very renowned institute in Munich, Germany, and unfortunately has not gained much traction despite the proof that you're going to see in this video. So without further ado, let's watch the video and what those scientists have observed, and you can see for yourself and make up your own opinion and mind. And then afterwards, we're going to talk about some implications of that proof and some consequences that we can draw from it, and how we should behave and how we should treat cancer patients therefore. So without further ado, let's dive right into the video proof of cancer as a parasitical infection. Let's go more than 30 years back in time. At the renowned Patent Cover Institute in Munich, Germany, three German medical doctors, Dr. Übing, Schiertz, and Dr. Winter, were busy studying strange objects in human blood. They published their results in the renowned scientific journal Ärztliche Praxis under the title Unusual Corpuscular Elements in Blood.
Okay, so I'm going to stop there on the recording, but you can see that these people are serious scientists. They've looked at it. This has been going on for decades, and we have not been aware of it. I recommend you watch that whole video. The sound kind of goes in and out, but I recommend you take time and watch the video. These are the questions I asked myself. Why is cancer bursting out after people get the vaccine, especially in the soldiers? So I was in the Navy for 10 years. We took care of young guys, the 20-year-olds, that's your standard patient. And when they showed up with cancer, it would be a single solitary cancer, usually things like testicular cancer that young men are more apt to get. But it wasn't that they had cancer all over their body. Now they take the vaccine and they have cancer all over their body, according to some of the doctors I've talked to in the military. Now, this goes along with an idea that if cancer is parasites, these are guys that have been out in Afghanistan and weird places, snooping and pooping through the brush on the ground. They may come from farm country where they were, around animals, and they've probably got a pretty good dose of parasite load. And now their immune system's damaged by the vaccine, and the parasites all break out at once, giving them this multiple look of cancer. You see, when we talk about something being cancer, we just look at an MRI and we see that it's got multiple white spots on like either dark spots or white spots on the various different weighted images. And we say, well, that's obviously metastasis, because we think nothing else could do that, because we're not thinking paradigm shift. We're not thinking of parasites. Okay. Why does autoimmune disease respond to antiparasitical drugs? Hydroxychloroquine's antiparasitical, right? But they give it as Plaquenil, and they use it for rheumatoid arthritis and lupus. And why does it respond? And it responds for a while, but then it doesn't continue to respond. And I can tell you why that is. It has to do with the way you should do it for parasites. Then the real question is, why do they hate antiparasiticals? Why can't we find mRNA in the vaccines? 18 labs around the country cannot find mRNA in the vaccines. And finally, I would say the parasite paradigm fits the religious belief of the psychopaths giving us this. I will tell you that the people that go back to the ancient times of the religion that goes back to ancient Babylon, this actually is an idea that from the Babylonian Talmud, they call it, and it's an idea that I'm not guilty if I don't directly kill you. If I tie you up on, this is an example, I believe, directly from the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud. You tie somebody up on the floor in their kitchen so they can't feed themselves and they die of starvation, I'm not morally responsible. But in this case, I didn't kill you. Your parasites killed you. I know that sounds a little odd, but I think it goes along with everything else in this whole mess. So here's my parasite worldview hypothesis. Okay. Parasites slowly increase in your body over a lifetime. The mother worm lays 20 to 200,000 eggs a day. And it doesn't necessarily need to be worms. These could be microscopic. If there are any general surgeons out there, I know what you're saying. I open up the gut all the time and I don't see parasites, because these are intracellular parasites or microscopic parasites. And they're not something that most people would see. Occasionally, you have actual gut parasites, and they are higher up where general surgeons generally don't go. You're mostly in the colon. These are in the small intestine for the most part. So over a lifetime, these egg sacs, most of them pass out of the body, but some of the 200,000 laid every day go into your cells and become cysts. Okay, they're encysted. They're walled off by the body as cysts. As more cysts are present, then it takes more of your immune system to keep them in check. And more of your immune system working to keep them in check means autoimmune disease. So what do we see? We see that, people have the cancer gene, but they don't get cancer at age 10. When do they get cancer? They still have the same gene. They get cancer at age 50 or 60 or 70, because now they've got their immune system cannot keep the parasites in check, and they start growing, and we see it and call it cancer. Apparently under the, and this is something I learned from Brian Ardis, whose friend is a serious 40-year Egyptian parasitologist. And Egyptian parasitologists, they're kind of on the top of that pyramid because, no pun intended, because they know they have parasites. They have all sorts of parasites, and they're very astute about this, right? Well, he was talking to him one time, and Brian said to him, I see, when I look at a parasite egg sac under the microscope and I see cancer under the microscope, they look identical. And this guy just looked at him kind of wide-eyed and said, in 40 years of doing parasitology, I've never had an oncologist, cancer doctor, make that association. But in parasitology, we do it all the time, which says to me they know, but they can't speak or they'll lose their funding. But as the autoimmune disease, as the point is, as you get older and your immune system is overtaxed, kind of like a computer that's got too many things running in the background, it can't keep these all in control. And then we start seeing autoimmune disease. And when you get a little older, we start seeing cancer. Now, this is like the Roman Empire. This is my metaphor. When the Roman Empire was small, the sentries could easily guard the empire. But as the empire gets bigger and bigger, then it was harder. You didn't have enough sentries to really guard the empire. And then my ancestors, the Goths and Visigoths, they'd sneak in and then destroy things and wreak havoc. So that's what happens in your body. Your immune system just gets overtaxed when you get too many egg parasites to take care of. Now, the next point is, those are our parasites. What if we're dealing with a synthetic parasite? And we actually, Dr. Larry Palevsky and I talked about this way back. Notice the date on this. This is January, February, March, April, May, June, July 15th of 2021. We talked about the spike protein being a toxin, a synthetic toxin, a synthetic poison, not a viral agent. And so that was what we were talking about then. But Karen Kingston has really figured out a lot more about this. Now, this is one of my favorite people, that is also one of her favorite people, Professor James Giordano. And I say he's our favorite, villain scientist. I don't know him personally, and I don't want to say too much, but I'm just saying, this is creepy, bad James Bond, Dr. Evil stuff that is coming out here. And here's what he's saying. He's saying exemptions for health and routine experimental use may foster a gray zone within which investigations for viability and employment as weapons may be undertaken. So he speaks in very flowery, kind of convoluted English. But what he's saying here is that you can't make a bioweapon, a neural weapon, and overtly do it, because that violates the the ethical constraints. But because we're under the guise of health and human wellness experimentation, you can experiment on everything, including bioweapons. That's essentially what I think he's saying there. Now, he gives a talk about the brain is the current and future battle space. He says you can access, assess, and affect the brain. And that's what we're talking about here with synthetic parasites. These things go all over. And what is the point here? The point is that these things are made with hydrogel that is not just a polymer that absorbs water like we know things do. This is a polymer that's cross-linked, that absorbs water, that also is genetically engineered, that can reproduce itself, that can grow, okay? And it can respond to the stimulus from the outside, including wavelength. That's called smart genetically engineered hydrogel. Now, he was a member of the neuroethics subcommittee, a member of this organization, IEE Brain, and he was the chairman of the neuroethics subcommittee. This is the kind of thing, though, that they have on their website: distributed wireless networks of micro implants for neural recording and stimulation. So they always do it under the guise of it being a disease. Like, we're going to treat Parkinson's. I can't tell you how many times I've heard we're going to solve Parkinson's. Well, what is happening with this vaccine? We're seeing more of it, right? We're seeing more ALS, Parkinson's, strokes, everything neurologic, just coma. I mean, just shutting your brain down. Guillain-Barré. I studied in the Queen Square Institute of Neurology, and I never saw a case of Guillain-Barré, 800-bed hospital of neurologic patients. I see it now. Okay, now this is what Karen Kingston has come up with, and I think she's going to turn out to be completely right here, that they couldn't make this work with biologic genetic material. They couldn't make the bioweapon that way. So what they did is they made an artificial hydrogel of this smart GE hydrogel, and it is the spike protein. Now, this is the picture on the right, is what they call the spike protein. just actually just one little part of it. But this, this is the thing on the right is CGI. It's nothing. It's scary. Oh, spike protein. It sounds really scary. It's no more scary than my dryer ball that looks quite similar, only blue. But this thing on the left that this hypodermic needle is pointing to, that is a nanoparticle bioweaponized smart hydrogel. And I think that may be what we're dealing with. It would also explain these big rubbery clots. These things are white and they can make long clots. Now, what her point is that these things are AI created, and they may in fact be AI themselves. They may actually have contact with the mother artificial intelligence and bring that into you. But they are acting like parasites, and they're synthetic. And they're controllable. So the spike protein has two configurations. In one configuration, it can't attack your ACE2 pathway. But given the right wavelength, these things conform to the other configuration. Now they can hook into your ACE2 pathway and make you sick. And they're made out of this genetically engineered hydrogel. So picture this. What could have happened, and what I believe had happened, without knowing this part of it, I believed from the get-go that this was a contact pathogen. So they're spreading this stuff in the air, the water, you name it. They spread it on surfaces. But then where they turn on 5G, people start getting sick because they've got this stuff in them and it reacts to it. It now binds with the ACE2 pathway and it makes you sick. You start losing your sodium. You start doing all the things we associate with the ACE2 pathway. And this does explain everything we see. Okay. Now, it's also, these things are self-replicating, so it could also explain shedding. So this is my view of what happened in 2020 during the outbreak. First, you had on the left of this bell-shaped curve, phase one of the war against humanity here, the bio war. Phase one was spread this gel around in Wuhan, and then in Lombardy, and then in New York City. I can tell you in my state of Iowa, a friend of mine looked at the outbreaks of COVID, and they came right along Highway 80 up which goes east-west across the state, right across the state in kind of a regular pattern. These outbreaks went, that wasn't all over the state randomly. It was right up Highway 80 primarily. Those were the big outbreaks. Okay. And then they turned on the 5G in Wuhan and made it look really scary. But then I was graphing every day the death count, and you could see that the death count started to go back down in America and in other countries, just like a normal seasonal death season, right? But they then implemented these fake PCR tests to convince everybody that, oh, it was all over the place. It was getting worse, even in the face of diminishing death. Okay, it was getting worse and everybody had to be afraid. So the death count was coming down, and then people were afraid. So they went out and got this vaccine that contained the same genetically engineered hydrogel toxic pseudoprotein. And now they're having results from that. Now, there are also other toxins in the vaccine, including the graphene oxide, which we can talk about, but I don't think those are long-term problems. Those are short-term problems. I think graphene oxide probably gets excreted through the kidney. I mean, not through the kidney, through the liver, very much like carbon-60 does. So I don't think that's a long-term problem, but in the short term, graphene oxide damages you by stripping out the negative charges in the vascular tree and causing clotting, causing rouleau formation and probably clotting. But those are the normal clots. What we're seeing later that the morticians are taking out of people are these big whitish rubbery weird clots. That would go along with the hydrogel. Okay, and this is the idea that this thing is conformable, that 5G makes it change its 3D spatial shape, and that now can hook in and make you sick because they can turn the disease on and off to some degree. And that, oh, by the way, and that depends on how many 5G nodes they have, right? So the solution to this is to not allow them to build 1 million 5G towers and take down the Starlink, and in the short term to do EMF mitigation, which I'm going to mention. But really the quickest thing we can do right now is anti-parasiticals. And that's why I made this video. And now I'm going to tell you how to do it. Now well, in a couple minutes, I got this to say. So here's a picture of parasites in the bloodstream. The little round things are your red blood cells, and the little purple things are stained. Those look like trypanosomes, but they're a small parasite, right, that swims around in you. Now, all parasites are not in the bloodstream. Parasites encysted, and these are some pictures of encystment of parasites. Here's one in the muscle that could be like Oh, there's a bunch of them that do that, but the classic one is the pork tapeworm and the pork trichinosis parasite that can exist in the muscle like that. And then in the far right, we have a brain that has a little white lesion there. That's a parasitic cyst in the brain. And here's a guy that's obviously dead because this is a pathology specimen. And this is multiple cysts in the brain. The most common reason for that is cysticercosis, or it's a tapeworm that's very common in Mexico and in South America. So that's what it does to your brain. So the point is, we have to not only destroy the parasites that you could see in your stool sometimes or in your blood, but we must destroy the cysts. And here's how we do it. So, we need medicines. I love the fact that, remember George Carlin used to have the 7 words, dirty words you couldn't say on TV. And well, now you can say them all, but you cannot say nitazoxanide, chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, fenbendazole, or chlorine dioxide. In fact, you'll go to jail for chlorine dioxide. So anything I say from now on is not meant as official medical advice. This is what I do for myself. If it's an educational program, you can choose what you're going to do for yourself. Now, to get rid of parasites, I did this. I used 2 drugs. I used fenbendazole, which is Panacure C. That is the common drug that people take they go to the vet, and their vet does for their dog worming, right? We used to use that, and we still do, for farmers. They use it for cattle, and they used to worm themselves. But unfortunately, they're not worming themselves as much. Now, the other drug I use is nitazoxanide. Now, I'll tell you why I decided to use nitazoxanide. I chose those 2 drugs because fenbendazole gets into the brain and nitazoxanide takes out Hydra. One of the things, when I first saw that little creature that Carrie Made found under the slide that was moving, we both thought it looked like it could be Hydra or something like that. And I decided to look up Hydra. Hydra, it turns out, is a freshwater parasite that contaminates people's aquariums, and people use nitazoxanide to clean out the Hydra in their aquarium. So I looked up nitazoxanide. It turns out it's a super duper parasite drug. It gets rid of beef tapeworm 85% in 3 days. I had a senior chief in the Navy with beef tapeworm. He'd been treated for years. He finally just named it the tapeworm because we couldn't get rid of it. I mean, this stuff is awesome, nitazoxanide, but get this. There are 3 drugs on the remdesivir trial at the NIH, remdesivir, and then to make it look better, they added ivermectin and nitazoxanide. So I'd never heard of the drug until this whole thing came out, and I looked up aquariums, but it's a great drug. So I started with fenbendazole because I had it available, and I actually took the animal weight on the syringe. If you look at the Panacure C syringe, it looks like a great big plastic syringe, and you're going to squirt it in the mouth of your horse, right, or your cattle. So you go by weight, and I think it goes up to 1,250 pounds. So I've set the little ring to give me the dose for a 150-pound animal, and I tried squirting it in my mouth, and it's kind of okay. You can do it. It tastes kind of chalky, or you can put it in a glass of water. I like that a little bit better and just wolf that down, but however you want to get it in. It is extremely safe. They have done 4 grams of one-time liquid fenbendazole to humans and without toxicity. None of this stuff is highly toxic. It's very well tolerated, okay? Now, so that was what I did, and I used these 2 drugs. Now, here's how I did it, okay? And here's why. So the first thing you have to understand, and this is why parasites are hard to get rid of, is that you have a mother parasite and you have baby parasites, right? The mother lays 20,000 to 200,000 eggs a day. While the mother is alive, those eggs don't hatch. But if you kill the mother, then you will have to then face the fact that the mother gives out a hormone, and now you're going to have to kill the babies, and you have to dissolve the cysts. So there's a lifetime program here that this cyclic therapy. And so use at least 2 drugs. So you're getting 1 into the brain at least, and you're getting 1 into the cysts, which is also fenbendazole does the brain and the cysts, and nitazoxanide is the best for gut parasites. That's my personal protocol. You might be able to do research and find a better combination. If you have ivermectin, I know ivermectin works, but I don't know as much about ivermectin and parasites as I do about ivermectin and COVID, and you can look that up. Okay, so this is why you cycle the treatment. So you start out with mother parasite and her babies, and the mother has laid these eggs and they're encysted in you. Now, the mother's doesn't want to suddenly have to fight for 1 million baby parasites in order to not, in order to be alive in your gut or wherever she is. So she puts out a hormone that keeps the baby parasites from insisting or from coming out of the cyst and joining her, right? So she's by herself, she's laying all these eggs, and these things are sitting in their cysts, but their cysts are getting bigger. I mean, the cysts are getting more numerous all over your body. Well, then what happens? Well, then we kill the mother parasite. And what does that do? Well, that makes the hormone go away. And what does that do? That makes the parasite now hatch out. Now, if you go too long before you treat yourself again, you won't just have a few hatched out parasites. You'll have more and more parasites until you're really toxic. And that's a real problem. And that's called a Herxheimer reaction. And if you don't get a lot of detail, just I'm laying it out. I hope to be detailed, but this is the biggest issue I got to talk to you about, is why you have to cycle and how you cycle the parasite program. If you just take parasite medicine every day or once a week, it's not just randomly, it's not going to really do it. You have to take enough to kill the parasite, the mother parasite. Then you have to wait a specific waiting time until you do it again. And if you wait too long, you're going to have all these baby parasites hatch out, and then you're going to kill them at your next time you take the parasite medicine, and you will not be a happy camper, because what it does, these dead parasites in your body will give you an IgE histamine reaction. And that's what gives you cold. That's what cold is essentially. You're getting watery eyes, sneezing, and you can get muscle aches and pains and fatigue, and you can feel like you have, quote, the flu, but it's just dead parasites. This is why we have to change our speech, because it's all toxins. Okay. Dead parasites are toxins. Okay. So this is what happens. So the key is, don't wait too long. Now, let's say you take the drug, and after the very first time you take the drug, you start having this reaction. Then you need to cut down on the dose of the drug and go slower, or you have a rash. People say, oh, I took the drug and I got whatever it was, whether it was chlorine dioxide or any of these drugs. I took the drug and I got a rash. Well, you can switch drugs, but it's unlikely that it's an allergy to the drug. What happened is you're normally naturally allergic to dead parasites. That's what's happening. So every time you get a rash, think toxin, don't think disease. So here's how you cycle. You start with a very short cycle, okay? You're going to take the drug for 3 days and then 5 days off. At least this is what I would do. And then if you go too long off the drug, you may have a large hatch out. So you don't want to do this. So you take three days on. I took 3 days on, 5 days off. And then I gradually lengthened my cycle. So 3 days on, 7 days off, 3 days on, 10 days off. And then you watch for the reaction. Now, I can tell you, I'm up to 3 days on. I've been doing this for 6 months or more. I'm still not at a month because I was riddled with parasites. 3 days on, and I'm 21 days off, but not quite a month. And even then, I'm getting a little bit of the sneezy kind of not feeling great reaction. So I'm staying at 21 days. I can live with what I'm getting. I can stay at 21 days, and hopefully I can lengthen it out. Because once you get to 3 days on and a month off, you're on maintenance then. And if you're not having any symptoms, and you've got them beaten down and you're on maintenance, but you never stop because you never completely are out in a parasite-free world, and especially now with the synthetic parasites. You need to do this short cycles for a minimum of a couple months in an adult. What I'm telling you is for adults. So now the next point is the EMF. And I have a whole nother video on my website, on my symposium on how to be so healthy you don't need a doctor, on my website. And you can purchase the whole symposium, where I cover all sorts of topics from diet to exercise, etc. Or you can just purchase the EMF portion if you go to learningforyou.org and look for the courses done by me. I also have others there. This is Sherry Tenpenny's site, and it's, I think, a good understanding of EMF and how to mitigate it. You have a link to this site I would go there, because if you go through my my website, it helps us fight the war effort a little bit, but it also gives you the people that I really trust the most, because they've done bioassays. And I think I show it here. Let me just show you that. Maybe I don't. No, I don't have that. But they've actually done what's called the mold test, and they can show that the routers in your house, which are the worst, cause premature molding of bread. But when they put their solution devices down by the bread, then it doesn't mold early. They've looked at the calcium channels that this affects. They've looked at blood coagulation. Blood rouleau formation. They've looked at a lot of things, and they can show you with bioassays that this stuff works. And that's the only one I found. Now, if there are more out there, I'm glad to learn. In summary, parasites are at the heart of this. This is how to do a parasite protocol. Don't forget the EMF. And then the next thing to do is chlorine dioxide. And that protocol is on my website right there. It's a simple guide. Chlorine dioxide, I really love chlorine dioxide, but if you tell people to take it, you go to jail. So I wouldn't tell anybody to take it, but I just let you know I take it myself. And I learned about this from Bishop Grennan, who's still in jail with his sons 2.5 years later for crimes against humanity. On the other hand, chlorine dioxide is used in agriculture. It's used in industry. Most of your food in the grocery store is treated with chlorine dioxide. Go figure. But so one of the problems with chlorine dioxide is that the formulas and the way to do it was all created by missionaries all over the world. So it's kind of a hodgepodge. If you go to my site, I try and make it simple. It's right there. You can see it just below the Exit the Biomatrix. You'll see that chlorine dioxide, a simple guide. So thank you for listening. And please come support the Rebel shop and keep us on air, and more to follow. Thank you very much. And thanks to all my colleagues that helped with the knowledge.